The Hustleshare podcast is sponsored by One CFO, the Philippines' leading fractional CFO services provider for startups, scale-ups, and SMEs. Experience the power of tech-enabled, efficient, affordable, and expert-led fractional CFO services. Let One CFO handle your finances so you can focus on growing your business. Book your free CFO consultation today.
You just immediately realize that the only way is dedicated, right? The only way to really maximize.
Or nothing.
100%, right? Go big or go home. So suddenly I found myself with not applying for jobs anymore. I didn't really make a conscious decision, but I just stopped applying for jobs. And, I had sort of decent savings in the bank from my corporate time. So we were living off that. We were getting the Idea Space grant for product development and the early sort of startup stages there.
Welcome to Hustleshare, the podcast that features the daily grinds of unique hustlers around the world to show not our differences, but that our hustles are very much alike. Now here's your host, Ronster Betyong.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Share Podcast. We finally got this guy. I've been wanting to get this guy for the past, 2, 3, 4 years now? It's been forever. But again, I'm lucky because the past couple episodes after I got sick back-to-back weeks have been bangers. These are key cogs in the Philippine startup ecosystem. A lot of people that you see a lot and have helped a lot over the past couple of years, especially during the pandemic. But it wouldn't be complete if we didn't have this guy. Long overdue, but finally we're here. But without further ado, let's welcome to the show, Mr. Ben Alderson. Whoop, whoop. Ben, welcome to the show. Finally, we're here.
Awesome. Thank you, Ron. Great to be here.
Yep. Again, this is like our third attempt. Trying to get this done, but finally we're recording. I'm super duper happy. And again, you've been a key cog to the startup ecosystem, not just as an investor, but as a mentor. And also, I don't know if people know, you were a former founder as well, right? So
that's right. You go back far enough,
right? So he went the whole gamut. That's why your journey as a mentor, investor, and everything else adds so much value. But without further ado, I need to ask you the $1 million question. Ben, what's your hustle?
Okay, so I guess we're going to go through the story, right? But I guess today, I look at myself as a mentor and coach for especially early stage startups in the Philippines ecosystem. Trying to add what value I can, and currently work behind the brand of BA Mentor Online. So that's my hustle today.
No, absolutely. And again, like what I said, being a mentor, and in my book, and this is just my connotation of it, you cannot be a mentor if what you're trying to teach is something that you have not gone and done it yourself. If you cannot teach what you don't know or you haven't toiled with. And as Ben adds so much value, not just being an investor, being an angel. So she's been through the VC route. He knows how VCs operate, how he operates as an angel, but also he was a founder. So all the lenses that you can probably think of, you've already done. And that's what's exciting about this. But before we get carried away, of course, before we say you're a mentor, we need to show exactly how you earned your stripes. But before that, you need to buckle up real quick, because we're going to have to ride the Hustleshare time machine. All right. And again, Ben is one of those weird people that listen to Hustleshare consistently. So I don't know what it felt like when now it was your turn riding the time machine. Is it different?
I didn't know. It's like a major milestone birthday. Like something's different, but you kind of feel the same. But something's different. I don't know what happened.
There you go. Because you are the one in the driver's seat on the time machine right there. So again, Ben, you've heard me ask this question, but I'm very, very curious about your origin story, because I've known you as a founder. I've known you as a angel of mine, pun intended, angel of mine, and also as a VC when you were still in Idea Space. both are distinct, but also weirdly the same. Also because it's you as the common denominator. But I want to find out first, what was it like growing up, and what do you remember at the first stages of you hustling, or who influenced you to hustle early on in your life?
Sure thing. Yeah. So look, I mean, as I guess most people can guess, it's actually, you know what? A lot of people assume from my accent and whatever else that I'm Australian or American before British.
No way.
So yeah. So, and I think because I don't have like a Hugh Grant, kind of posh English accent, and I don't have a kind of regional Liverpool or Manchester, strong accent. So I confuse people. But yeah, from the UK originally. My family kind of fight over my origin story because my parents divorced when I was quite young. My dad is from the north, and my brother also from the north of England, but my mom was from the south. So there was some sort of regional friction over my belonging. But yeah, I was born in the north of England in Yorkshire, in a pretty kind of countryside area. But then when my parents split when I was quite young, around 3 years old, I moved to the south. So I grew up in leafy Surrey, and I went to school in between Surrey and Sussex down in the south of England, which for anyone that doesn't know is kind of just that bit immediately below London. So yeah, about a 45-minute ride south out of London, and you're in Surrey, Sussex area in the UK. And I know hustle, like I'll be honest, Ron, like I had a pretty privileged childhood. I did my weekends.
Did you have a castle? Jobs. How privileged are we talking about? Do you have a castle? Did you have beef? What are we talking about?
No, not rich privilege, but comfortable. Let's just say that. Right?
Okay. I mean, you have to be comfortable, because when you talk about privilege in England, we're talking about like royalty.
Well, so look, here's the thing, right? So look, my mom hustled super hard. That's where I get my hustle from originally. My mom, and I know you've told this story many times as well, right? So when my parents split, my mom brought me up in the south of England. That was very present, very active, supported, etc. But I lived alone with my mom, and so that's where the hustle came from. And I'm a father now of a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And it really, it just, you realize so much,
correct.
What being a parent is, and how much you just didn't realize is going on, from, mom juggling life, juggling, work, juggling the household, making sure I went to football practice, and, just everything going on. So that, without me really knowing it, that was probably where a lot of the hustle gets grounded. But you asked about a castle, and whilst we had a pretty normal kind of household situation, but my grandfather did pretty well over his lifetime, and he and my mum decided that I would go to a pretty decent school, nice. And you can look it up. It's called Lancing College. I went to high school.
College, okay.
It basically is a castle. Wow. So it's one of those old English boarding school situations where half of my year group were millionaires, and I was very lucky to go there. And luckily, it was pretty cool. Like, so we used to play the other posh schools around the area, like Eton, where Prince Harry is in my year group at school.
No way.
Same age. Yeah. So he came and played sport he was in the D team for football. Wow. I can just share the achievements there for everyone. Like Winchester, Harrow, all these posh schools that we used to play. But they used to, because we were kind of more down to earth and grounded, they used to call us the comprehensive on the hill, which kind of means the poor school on the hill, because our school was set up on this hill over the sea. So we were like, we used to sort of revel in that, like we're the cool, we're the down to earth, we're the humble. Sort of thing. But yeah, you can look it up. It was a pretty awesome place. So I was very lucky about that. And then I went to university up in Nottingham, which is in the Midlands, in the middle of the UK. Okay. Before getting into career mode.
Okay, now career mode. Obviously, really, really nice origin story. I want to understand the first few skills you developed, because again, one thing I admire so much about you is you're always, when you approach something, whether as an angel or as a VC, this is where I've spent the most time with you. It's always fundamentally sound. right? And that fundamentals does not come from just something that you just innate with. You build that through the years. I want to understand where that came from. So career mode, what are the first few jobs you did, and what are the first few skill stacks that you remember developing?
Sure. So I studied engineering. I studied manufacturing engineering. So that's a lot of that's all process, constraints, resource, budget, deadlines. It's all problem solving basically.
Makes sense.
It's all like figuring out what are the parameters, what we've got to play with here, how do we make this happen, quality, etc. So a lot of it comes from that. But when I was kind of getting towards the end of my degree, I did a couple of internships in engineering companies, and I realized around that time, so we're talking mid sort of naughty 2000s, I realized that a lot of engineering was kind of going abroad, right? So, or had already gone abroad, right? So China, the East, Southeast Asia, of course, Central South America, a lot of high volume manufacturing capability was going over there. And so I realized from my internships that my managers, and I talked to the managers in the companies I was working for, and they were kind of waiting for their managers to move on or to whatever, to create opportunities, right? So it was a bit stagnant. And so I thought to myself, I'm not sure. And I wasn't really ready to leave the UK at that time. I was thinking, for whatever reason, I kind of wanted to be there. So, I kind of reinvented myself a little bit, and so like the second big influence on my life is my brother. So he had done the same thing. He'd done engineering, but then he got more into the commercial space, so kind of like law, legal contracts, that kind of thing. And he was the first person who also sort of showed me what the international career opportunities were. So he'd moved abroad very early after he graduated university and gone to China. And then he worked in Holland, he worked in Germany.
Wow.
All around Europe, and then eventually made his way over to Australia. So he was fishing, even though immediately after university, I wasn't ready to go abroad, but he was kind of saying that there's so much opportunity outside of the UK, so many experiences, right? So, and he's like the leading influence in my life in terms of kind of got to make things happen for yourself, right? So network is great, and things will come at you, but if you want to achieve a certain thing, you got to figure out, okay, how am I going to make that happen, right? What's the path?
Yep.
And where do I start today? So I decided that, after many conversations with him, I decided I didn't want to do engineering as a actual practice career. But it's a pretty good degree, so, in terms of transferable skills. So I ended up going into management consultancy, based out of London. Yeah.
Wow.
But so first job. Yeah. So that means you're doing like all the unglamorous stuff. That means you are, and you're going to start to see the parallels there, right? So that means you are crunching spreadsheets.
Yeah.
That means it
makes sense.
That means you are doing cost, exactly right. Cost benefit analysis. That means you're preparing slide decks for senior management, right? You're doing, because obviously you don't know anything about shit, right? When you graduate university, you can't go in and start telling clients what they're supposed to do, and how they should run their businesses, etc. Right? So you're doing all the grunt work, all the analysis, all the options assessment, etc., all the presentations, etc. So I did basically 5 years of that, which was kind of my hands-on business training. I worked with the UK government. I worked with Honda Motors. Super interesting stuff. And then I ended up at IHG. For those that don't know, that's Intercontinental Hotels Group. And so this is all just kind of a combination of strategy, program management, process, operations improvement, all in that kind of space. And then it was IHG where they basically said, look, we want to make this consulting role full time. So, how about you write the job spec for it, and then we have to throw it open, obviously, but then we'd appreciate it if you applied as well. And I managed to
you wrote your own job description, technically.
I I wrote the own job description. It was all above board. I just want to say, all above board. I had to go through. So I did the role for like a year and a half as a consultant, and then I wrote the job spec, and then I had to go through all the application procedures. I had to go through the interview with HR, the interview with the hiring manager. I had to watch people. I used to have a desk right outside my boss's office, so I had to watch the other applicants walk in past me, walk in for that interview for the job that I designed. Wow. But fortunately, I was able to land it. So that's how I moved out of consulting and into work with IH.
Okay, so again, now it makes sense why you're so meticulous about these things. Because again, I've seen this pattern with all these big three founders. There's a lot of them. There's so many of them out here in the Philippines that are coming from BCG. And Anthony, when you see Anthony all the time of BCG, is like, these are my brethren, and they're now startup founders. And most of the time, a lot of these BCG founders, I don't even know one that's former BCG per se, that haven't been funded at least multiple rounds. They get it, and this is not because they came from BCG or the big three, from McKinsey, from Bain. It's because how they were trained to solve problems fundamentally. And that's what I want to zoom in before we talk about IHG and for those people who don't know what Intercontinental Hotel Group. Ayan. So therefore there was an Intercon who now hotel, who's now One Ayala in there. So that's the company that ran it. But Ben, I want to zoom in on that because you obviously carry that along. And I've seen so many great founders start from that origin story of working in a consulting group, being heads down. Yes, fancy name, fancy job, consultancy group. But man, that type of hustle is very, very much foundational to actually being a founder. What was that experience about? And tell me anecdotes or stories about how that really shaped your career moving forward.
Sure. So look, I think especially the way I did it, which was to go straight from university, right? A lot of people, they feel kind of weird about consulting straight from university, right? You want to go and experience an industry, right? Go work in FMCG or automotive or house or whatever, right? And so you actually have something to talk about. But I did my research and I realized that there was a pretty good like grad career path there. But you do, I think, unless you're just the most confident, arrogant person
or naive,
you do have a bit of imposter syndrome, right? Like it's it's all good when you're in head office, you're amongst your colleagues and you're doing like training and development, you're learning from all sorts of people, right? But as soon as you're shipped out on client side, and my first project, by the way, was a solo project, so I was sent out on my own.
Wow.
So partner was checking in on me, to make sure I was okay, but there's not even anyone to defer to in that situation, right? So, a little bit of imposter syndrome, a little bit of pressure, because obviously that the clients are paying rate, right? They're paying decent rate. That's how consulting, companies make money. So, so there is a bit of pressure there, and I think unless you're in that incredibly overconfident sort of category of people, just means you kind of throw the work at stuff to make sure it gets done right. So you bring your problem solving tool set from your engineering degree and whatever else you've kind of done in life. But then the great thing about consulting companies people don't realize is the rest of the company, right? So it's not just project teams. If you guys come up against a challenge or you need a bit of extra insight, there's normally departments and teams of people with experience back in the office or working on other projects, right? And you set up another call with those guys and you just source the information you need. You source the insight, you source the framework, whatever it is that you need, and you apply it to the project that you're working on. So, it's just the pressure when you're a consultant, you're not, when you're working in-house. I'm not saying in-house jobs are easy. Please don't get me wrong, but there's a certain cycle. There's you know what your roles are, your tasks, your responsibilities. You've got managers and teams to make it happen. When you're consulting, someone's paying you for an outcome. And if you don't deliver the outcome, then the credibility drops and it's not a good thing. So I think that's where the sort of the pressure or the drive to just be meticulous and leave no stone unturned and make sure that you're kind of delivering. And I guess on top of that, I was always conscious that there was no, when you join consulting, it's fantastic because you get, especially if you do, a number of projects, you get this, you get a lot of exposure to a lot of different business scenarios, and that's fantastic. But the other side of things is you put one eye on career development. So you think, right, so I'm not becoming an FMCG guy or a finance guy or a whatever guy, right? Like I'm not building a set of expertise and understanding in a particular industry. So what am I building? So you're also consciously trying to get everything out of each project that you do, whether it's program management, whether it's strategy, whether it's process improvement, cost reduction, so that you can kind of add those bullet points to your CV, those areas of expertise to what you might be able to do in the future. So I guess that's kind of where it comes from.
So that's where, and also again, the beauty about it is that if you're doing consulting, yes, you kind of build a jack of all trades type of approach, but you still get enough reps because it's not just like a one and done, and your experience is shallow because you're actually there to help solve problems for every single client and spend enough time and a lot of time with them, actually, depending on the client, to actually do that. All right, let's take us first break, and then we will come back with then talking about how you did the IHG hustle, how you became a founder, and of course, how you became an angel and a VC. We'll talk about that more after the break.
Hey hustlers, ever feel like your money's flowing in, but your profits are nowhere to be seen? Is managing your cash a constant source of stress, leaving you anxious about day-to-day operations? Or maybe you're holding back on growth because you're unsure if your finances are really stable. The real problem? You don't have a clear picture of your finances. Without a strategic financial partner, you're basically operating in the dark, always one step away from hidden pitfalls. But what if you had a seasoned fractional CFO who understands these challenges and gives you clear and straightforward steps to increase profits and grow steadily without the cost of a full-time CFO? That's what One CFO delivers. One CFO combines the strategic thinking of experienced CFOs with their own cutting-edge CFO tech platform, giving you transparent, real-time insights that empower you to make smart moves. They're the go-to fractional CFO partner for growing companies like Quick Insure, Avion School, J Labs, Advance, One Lot, Colorep, and Stash, helping them conquer financial challenges and achieve remarkable growth. Imagine having a crystal clear view of your financial performance and the confidence to execute bold, growth-driving strategies. Ready to level up? Click the link in the description or go to onecfoph.co. That's onecfoph.co right now to book your free no-obligation consultation. Gain clarity in your finances and grow your business with confidence. Click the link or visit onecfoph.co today.
And we're back in the break. We are still with Ben Alderson, that told us the amazing origin story of how he started out his career. And now I understand where this meticulous fundamental approach that he gives. Because just to give context, when Ben gives advice, it's not shallow, like it's not lip service. Because some guys are like that, like, yeah, you know what, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, great. And what I've learned throughout the years is that advice comes from two things. And and here's what you need to understand as a founder. Advice is almost always biased. It's always biased from somebody's background. So you have to take it with a grain of salt, because some guys, majority of the time when they give advice, whether it's solicited or unsolicited, they come from usually a good intent anyway. They're not going to give advice just to fucking flex. Some guys do, but a vast majority, they mean well when they give advice. But you have to take it with a grain of salt, because the bias comes from where they came from their lens. And what I love about it when Ben gives it, it's like, man, this has a lot of detail. Like, he will send a long ass message or a long ass email that gives that's well thought of, and it makes sense a lot. I was like, shit, it would be very embarrassing if I do not take this advice, because this guy just didn't throw out random blurbs and then give us weird advice, because I do get that a lot. So now as a founder, you need to be able to weigh who actually spent time to actually give solid advice. And that's what I love about Ben every single time. It was well thought of. It was this is pre-chat GPT, so he did not chat GPT this out. And he really gave it a lot of thought. And that's what I love about it. Because there's some advice that you get out here in the industry. It was like, especially in a startup gathering, I'd be like, some guys would be like, "Hey Ron, what's up? Let's talk shop." I'm like, huh? Talk shop? Like, first of all, I don't even know your background. Fuck am I gonna do with talking shop with you? Well, I need to kind of understand, where is this advice gonna come from? Because if not, the last thing I want to do is waste my time. And second, waste your time, because if it's not a match and your advice is just gonna be someone throwing random shit at me, let's not waste each other's time, right? And as a founder, do not get confused, because sometimes a lot of advice is again, they mean well, but it might not be the right advice at the right time. So always, always, always take it with a grain of salt, except if it came from Mr. Ben Alderson. Because he really put some thought into that.
That is too kind, man. And also, you put a very positive spin on that. The other way of talking about me in my talks in my emails are that, you think you're just sort of dropping in to say hi, and then half an hour later I stop talking. But I appreciate it. I do.
No, but it's again, it's solid quality advice. That's always a good benchmark. Like, and I only get that typically from VCs and people who actually know what the hell they're talking about. Because if someone put a lot of their thought and time in putting structure and actually the next steps of what you can do, that's what it is. Because most advice out there, it would be like, why don't you try this? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, huh?
That's,
right?
That's like, I think that's what's missing so much from, from sources of information that you might find on the internet, right? Or, there are amazing LinkedIn articles out there, or posts or points of view, and it's all really, really good stuff, right? But the actionable bit is the challenge, right? Because as founders, you don't know what you don't know. And when someone says, "Oh, this is what you should do," or "This is the key to unlocking this thing," and then like, "Okay, that's great," but then you sit down and go, "Okay, so what do I do? With my actual company, with my customers, with my products or service, with my team? What do I say? What do I do? What do I change?" It's not always so easy to take those insights or whatever it is, and so the actionable bit, the execution, as is 90%, right, of the challenge. So we try, I try and have always done to say, well, so here's the advice, but what does that actually look like for you guys in your team right now where you are? What would I do first? What's step one? And try and lay it out. And then it's up to people if they want to take that on, obviously. As one of the most important parts of being a mentor is you can't take a startup and just drop into the CEO role and do it for them. That doesn't help anyone. So you just gotta try and show the way.
All you can do is just give an inception, but at the end of the day, you cannot take the wheel and take it out from them. And this is what I want to talk about now, because again, solid fundamentals, consulting background, I get now where that structure comes from and that meticulous approach comes from. But of course, you had to get higher in your own supply. And after doing consulting in the UK, you now do IHG, wrote your own job description, but this wasn't done in the UK. This was done in Singapore. So you're literally halfway across the world now in Singapore.
So that IHG was actually the transition. So I got the role in IHG in the UK, in the Europe office.
And then you went to to Singapore. So what was that like, transition? Because again, totally different worlds. I mean, the best landing spot always Singapore because it's still first world, but it's Asia, right? What was that like? Yeah. And what did you learn in your stint in Singapore? And I want to talk about your stint as a founder.
Sure. So like just quickly on IHG, because there's I think it was a Steve Jobs quote, right? He said, it's only when you look back that the dots connect and the path makes sense, right? So when I moved in when I started at IHG, the role was with what we call like new hotel development. So in the big branded hotel company space, you have kind of three major areas. One is operations, so that's actually running hotels, serving guests, etc.
Yep.
Then you got brand development, because it's all about brand and the brand promise and loyalty programs and stuff like that. And then you've got growth. So as you get more hotels, more resorts, more city center boxes, etc., etc., and that's the area that I worked in, was strategy around finding ways to open new hotels. But something that not a lot of people know is that the big box, big brand hotel business is almost entirely franchised. And so, Hilton don't own Hilton hotels.
Right.
Crown Plaza don't own Crown Plaza hotels. They're all owned by high net worth. There you go. So, but in Europe, it's mostly institutional money. So it's pension funds and investment, investment vehicles, that kind of thing. In Southeast Asia, sure, there's some of that, but there's also, a high degree of high net worth individual or family wealth. And so regardless, either way, this was my first kind of introduction to the world of investment, effectively. So trying to figure out how you get people with money to invest in business opportunities, and build a roadmap for attracting that investment into your brand and selling your brand, right? And so, I look back on the materials that were produced, etc., and you realize that that's not a million miles away from a pitch deck, right? And from startup investor communication. So anyway, I worked in the UK office in the Europe region for IHG for about 2 years. And then the equivalent role basically came up in the Singapore office. I really wanted to travel. By that point, my brother's constant reminders that there's a big wide world out there, and there's opportunity. And he was living in Australia at the time, and was super close. So, the equivalent role to what I was doing in the UK came up in the Singapore office for the Southeast Asia, Africa, Middle East. Massive region. Basically, everything to the right of Europe except China was that region. So
the Eastern Hemisphere. There you go.
Yeah. So I transferred to Singapore office, and I was there for about 2.5 years. And in that time, I met my wife to be, who is Filipina, and she was working in big marketing agencies and organizations doing big projects all around Southeast Asia, but based out of Singapore. But she decided that she wanted to put up a startup herself. We figured out that Singapore is an expensive place to suddenly not have a salary, and as you know, registering a company, compliance there is pretty easy and pretty straightforward, but to grow a business, to do all of the other things, after that basically was pretty expensive. So she decided to move back to Manila, and I had to see out my contract. So about 6 months later, I followed on, and that was 2016. So by 2016, I moved to Manila, and I wasn't originally. So here's the thing, right? You may not know this. I had never had any intention of getting into the startup space. It was never like a plan.
What?
I never went, that's what I want to do next, right? I landed in Manila in 2016. And I kind of intended to take a break. So I wanted to, I'd been working in corporate for 10 years. Yeah. A lot of hustle, a lot of long hours, a lot of hard work, great times, a lot of, huge amount of fulfillment. But I decided to just take a little break, and cost of living in Manila, especially back in 2016, was pretty decent. So, I just wanted to take a step back and see what was going on. But then at some point I started, more proactively applying for jobs and roles, and a couple of things became very apparent to me. So the first one was in Manila. I mean, network is key wherever you are in the world. Yep. But in the Philippines, in Manila,
the only thing that matters.
Yeah. So I was firing off 5, 6, 7 job applications a day, and just nothing, no response, nothing. And my wife had been out of the Philippines for so long, so it was also relatively kind of disconnected. And because she'd been working in Singapore for years. So it was kind of tough. And we were we were talking to some friends of my wife's initially, now good friends of ours, Ginger and EJ Arboleda of Taxi Mode.
Shout out.
And they had, I can't remember where they were. I think they just finishing up batch 4 of Idea Space.
Yep.
Accelerator program.
One of the last few that's still alive from that batch.
Yeah.
If not the only one that's alive.
So and they, explaining this whole startup thing to me. We were having lunch or whatever and catching up with them. And then at the same time, I'd kind of started to notice that, some of my wife's family and certain, communities from the province were Avon ladies, Eva Belena ladies, Mary Kay, cosmetics resellers, right? And for whatever reason, I just got a little bit hung up on this industry and this supply chain. Like I couldn't believe how kind of out of date and antiquated it seemed to be, right? So these cosmetics companies are reproducing like catalogs every month, every quarter, depending on which brand it is, etc. Right? And it kind of, I found it weird because we were well into the smartphone era then, mobile apps, supply chain management software, etc. But the nature of those operations is just unbelievable. So not to mention the sustainability impact of reprinting glossy paper magazines, and you see them in bins, you see them on the streets, etc. when they've been discarded. So my wife and I just came up with this idea for a cosmetics reseller mobile app plugged into a back-end system managed by the brands. And we were talking about it with Ginger and EJ, and they said, that's a really cool idea. You should apply to Ideaspace.
Right.
So, fast forward a couple of months, we applied. I was still sort of thinking this would just be a project. This would be an experiment. I'm still applying for jobs with corporates and strategy and stuff like that. And, but yeah, like we got in, and then
nice,
and then that was it. That was it, into the deep end, and the rest is history.
Okay, so that's AppSell technically. This is 2017
right.
and whatnot. So first things first, founder market fit. All right, and I want to talk about this because this is so profound, and majority of the time, husband and wife or jowa couples. There's only 2 types. Those ones who make it work. Again, the Ginger Alvaredas of the world, the RJ Ledesma, Vanessa Ledesma type of couples, the ones that make it work. And there's also the ones that don't, just as couples, they just don't work at all, right? They just the marriage and the thing becomes goes into whack because they function as a couple, they don't function as co-founders. I want to understand first that dynamic, because the ones that make it work, oh my God, I mean, the lines are blurred. So I've tried that with my wife and whatnot. No matter how much you compartmentalize and say, hey, we're professional, shit in the marriage and the shit in the business bleeds over to the bedroom. I don't care what you say. Like, no, let's not talk about this one. Like, nope. That shit, you bring that home. As traditional co-founders, right? For example, me and my co-founders, we talk about shit. We can be intense. Leave that in the Zoom meeting, and I'm not going to see you at night. Right? I'm not going to see you right in my bedroom. There's a buffer. As couples, there are no buffers. You bring that everywhere. So that fight or that intense conversation or whatever it is, it can be a great conversation. That doesn't end in the Zoom meeting or the boardroom. You bring that on. So I want to understand how that dynamic worked first before we even talk about the startup and the struggles that you had to go through.
Sure. Well, I mean, I should preface this by saying like that my wife, as mentioned, she left Singapore and went back to Manila ahead of me to start Design Space. So it wasn't always called Design Space, but that's the graphic design talent sourcing business model that she runs. So
and that's still, by the way, that still works till today. 8 years going on.
Going strong. Yeah, going strong. So I can plug that a little bit more at the end. But if you're looking for graphic design talents, then do get in touch. But no, so she was always kind of prioritizing like heading that up, right? So we were working together on AppSell, but I was kind of more taking the lead on that whilst she was working. So it was create at least a nice easy separation. But I would say, not dodge the question completely and to try and give some value for the listeners as well. I think the most important thing is to define early on, right, who's responsible for decisions in what area. So, if it's the finance, if it's marketing or biz dev, if it's operations, product design, right? Like just say, right, someone in the relationship has to have final call on this based on their experience, on their skill set. And you just write that down and agree to it early. And then as you're working on the business together as a relationship, that inevitably stuff comes up you disagree on and you have, differing views. But if you've got that checklist, well, this is product design, so that's Ben's call. This is marketing, that's Cat's call. Yep. Then, as unhappy as the other person might be, you defer to the matrix and you just go with it. And then, and then you get over it. But I will say you're absolutely right? That doesn't mean that the disagreement of the difference of opinion goes away. Yep. So, I can say, okay, well, this is marketing. So that's your call because that's what, that's where her skill set lies. But that doesn't mean I agree with it. So I still got to bite my tongue the rest of the day. But I think, as time goes by, when we first started out on this founder journey, everything is raw and new and exciting and every decision feels like the most important one. And it's difficult to just let these things lie. But I think as you get a couple of years into relationship co-founder scenarios, then you realize, you just got to let it go and defer to the decision owner and then just let it go and then go out to dinner and, not talk about it or whatever, right? You never completely separate yourself. But you kind of learn to manage it.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, now let's talk about Upsell. So again, this is unique. I thought from the get-go that you were still working majority of the time, people have the itch. Here, when you did Upsell, again, your inception came from the Arboledas, right? Of AppSumo, technically. And you got there through Upsell, right? What was Upsell? And obviously you're the head of the snake here. What were you trying to do? And you got to Idea Space very early on. Idea Space or literally MVP mode. Walk us through that journey because this is the foray of yours getting to foundership.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, back then, especially, Idea Space Accelerator was
it was a grant.
It was a grant, and it wasn't. I mean, I'm not saying they didn't want you to be dedicated, but you could kind of manage your time. And so when I first, went into the program, I was thinking, I'll have to do a bit of consultancy or some freelancing to fund things. But then I my nature is that you've got this opportunity. So you came up with this idea for something, found a problem to solve, you came up with a solution, you get some money, and you think, well, why don't I just give this a go, right? So let's just go all in, kind of thing. And so that was kind of the transition, right? Like I was like, well, first it was I'm not doing anything else. I got into the accelerator program. There seems to be some good support here. So yeah, like I might as well give it a go, right? And then you just immediately realize that the only way is dedicated, right? The only way to really maximize
or nothing.
100%, right? Go big or go home. So suddenly I found myself just not applying for jobs anymore. I didn't really make a conscious decision, but I just stopped applying for jobs. And, I had sort of decent savings in the bank from my corporate time. So we were living off that. We were using the Idea Space grant for product development, and the early sort of startup stages there. And then suddenly, I don't know, one day you look in the mirror or you see yourself in a shop window as you're walking down the street and you realize that you're a startup founder and you don't really like how that happened, but there you are, right? You're on your way to pitch to an investor or go interview a product dev person and you realize, oh wow, yeah, I'm a startup founder. So that was that. And you're right. So we were batch 5 of the Idea Space Accelerator program. Technically, we started the application in December of 2016, but it was 2017 before everything got going. And 6-month program, so it lasted kind of the most of the second half of 2017. And it was, it was fantastic, and it was my introduction to the massive difference between fast moving early stage startups and hugely resourced the corporate world, where I was like, I think we, in the corporate world, I think we should do this. And like, okay, so you have to have a couple of meetings and you have to get buy-in and support, but then you can do it because there's money and there's people. and there's a whole team ready to go, right? In the startup world, it's like, I think I should do this, and you can start doing it straight away. But with what money, with what people, you gotta figure it all out, right? So that was a super roller coaster time, but amazing support from startup mother hen Diane Eustachio, and that was in the days with Brenda Valerio as well. Was running the accelerator program before she moved to New Energy Nexus, and a load of incredible people there. A lot of great mentors. Many of whom are still friends to this day. So that was great. You go through all the lessons, lean product design, customer validation. And that's actually where it started to go wrong for Upsell, right? So I don't know if this is the right kind of way to look at it, but we had two stakeholders in our scenario. The brand. So let's just say, Eva Belena, because they were the first client that we actually got a paid contract with. Okay. So Eva Belena, and then you've got the reseller. We started off designing for the resellers. We found some, we engaged with them. We followed them around for a day to see how they talk to their customers, how they use these catalogs, and et cetera, right? Right. So we kind of got to understand them. But then the brand started to get interested. The brands say, we've been looking for a technology solution for supply chain. So we started getting traction in conversations with the brands, and we switched our focus. This is the mistake that I made. We switched our focus to the brands, and we worked with Everblainer for a little while. We designed a system with them that would work, and then we launched. And expected everything to obviously fly out of the traps, right? Because I'd done the hard part. I'd got the brand, I'd got the client. Right. Nailed. They were paying, they were engaged. But we launched, and we launched in like a small test community, like a pilot area. We got 350 app downloads overnight as soon as we launched. It was messaged well. The team, the reseller kind of coordination team, did their job. So immediately people knew about this thing. And then a couple of days go by, weeks go by, no transactions, right? So none of the resellers are actually reordering inventory through the app, which is kind of, and we found out that there was two key reasons as to why that was. The first one was because they had to pay for the inventory as they ordered it through the app. Right now, they were used to going to a distribution hub, ordering, getting, paying the money, getting product. So they're never out of pocket. They've always got something of value, whether it's cash, whether it's product, they've got something of value, and they know they can sell that, so they're all good. But you ask them to order through the app. So for a period of time until they receive that inventory, whether they're going to collect it, whether it's going to be delivered, they're out of pocket, right? They don't have cash, they don't have the product, and they feel very at risk, very vulnerable in that situation. And then the second thing was that we had this feature within the mobile app where they could basically upload their contacts into the app so that they could create lists of who had ordered what. And we showed this to the resellers, and they just freaked out because their impression was that the brands are using this as a stepping stone to e-commerce. So they just want to cut us out, and then they want to go direct to the customer, so that they lose the commission they pay us. They don't have to pay anymore. So I cut a long story short, we battled for a few weeks and months to try to resolve these challenges. I just thought it was it's just another problem, right? In the way, so figure this out, but we struggled, and in the end, it just timing wise, just wasn't right.
Yes.
And
timing. This happened pre-pandemic.
Right? But yeah, this would have been
to
late
2019.
Yes, it would have been late 2017 to 2018 that we were pushing the product. I think that's when we had the product out, and we were, after a build. And timing is absolutely everything, right? And what's funny is 2020. I can't remember if it was 2022 or if it's 2023. Like I saw an Avon, like a global Avon press release about the all new Avon reseller app that they had developed, and it was. I'm not saying they stole it. To be very clear. But they had just over time they had just basically developed what we had built and pretty much replicated it. And I was just, it really, by this time I've moved on. I'm leading investments for Idea Space, but I just remember thinking to myself, timing is so important. And sometimes it's strategic, sometimes it's just luck. But if you don't get the timing right, it's not going to happen.
No, totally agree. And I said it so many times in the startup. What people always forget is that, okay, if you come in and if your product or startup requires an evangelization mode, whether especially in a two-sided market like this, Ben, where supply needs to change some behavior, and the demand where you're coming from these resellers, and you're at the mercy of both in order for your grand magic moment to happen. You need to be able to weather the storm where all things need to click, and that shit takes time. And again, majority of the time, you're either early in the game and you have to you have to weather the storm and wait for the perfect moment for that to happen. In order for all these things to meet. Obviously, the perfect moment for that to happen was a pandemic, because that would have been the perfect time. Like, all right, perfect, you're a ready thing.
Yeah.
And this is
That's right.
no, and that's the perfect time. And this is where, as a startup founder, you need to be ready to weather those dry desert moments where there's absolutely nothing. And in order for you to weather those dry moments, you either have to have two things, actually three things. First is resources. Keep your shit lean. Bare bones. Because if there's no cash flow coming in, whatever you have in the bank is all you have. You need to make sure that whatever runway you have, whether not paying yourself, keep whatever resources you have lean so that you can weather that storm. Second, so you keep yourself lean. Number two, you need to find alternative means of cash flow, especially in this country, because unless you're one of them superstar startups that can generate what or can raise 300,000, 500,000, $1 million free revenue, free product, which is rare in this country, you won't have that runway. So you need to find other means to be able to keep the lights on. Cash flow is king and cash is everything, right? And third, you have to have a lot of your pain threshold and you need to be irrational in your ability to bet on yourself as a founder, because there's a lot of days where a lot of this won't make sense anymore. And life gets in the way, especially you have a family, you have kids to pay and whatnot. You need to be able to bet on yourself every single time, but also look yourself in the mirror if it still makes sense or not. And this is what I wish I knew when I was younger. That if the last one, sorry, I'll add one more. 4. You have to have the ability to look at your co-founders and say, hey, do we actually have a chance of winning this still? If there isn't a way out, there's nothing wrong with just saying, we tried everything, call it quits.
Yeah.
There. So those are the things I wish I knew and whatnot. Do you agree? What's your take on this?
Yeah, 100%. And I think there's like a 4.2 as well, which is kind of, it's not a 5, it's related, right? Which is also passion for that thing, right? So what I realized at some point as well was, so there were 2 reasons why I decided to stop Upsell, right? Because I'm a big believer in, the only time you've really failed is when you stop, right? It's when you quit, right? Up until then, there's always a way. There's a way to turn it around, to revive, to whatever. But the 2 reasons why I stopped, one was, and this is super important, for founders building product, and especially that initial stage, right? Problem identification, developing a solution. The other thing I realized is, as well as timing, the resellers didn't care enough. The pain for them was not enough. They actually quite liked going around their customers, going to visit them in their houses with their they could take their catalogs and they'd mark against each product. Sarah wants this and Sophia wants 3 of these and so on, right? They caught up. It was social. You move everything over to a mobile app. Okay, it's kind of got a social media element to it, but you remove the interactions and you remove that reason for them to get out of the house on Saturday morning and go and see people, right? And so, and the process of marking things down on the catalog and recording the orders, and it wasn't actually that difficult or frustrating for them. It wasn't a big pain point, right? So it was a pain point for the brands because, they could have got a lot more supply chain efficiency, streamlines, cost benefits, etc. But you can't just survive on one stakeholder, right? You need both sides of the platform. And so that was the first thing I realized was I don't think there's enough pain here for one of our critical resellers, no matter how hard we try to figure this out and resolve it. And I don't know when that's going to change, right? And so there's a whole ton of uncertainty there. And the second thing I realized was I started this business because one, I wasn't getting any success applying for corporate strategy jobs and I needed something to do. And secondly, I was annoyed by the problem but it was annoyed, right? I wasn't angered or like on a mission to change this, right? I was like, that doesn't make sense. And it's annoying to look at and to sort of see that this is the way this thing works right now. It just feels inefficient, feels annoying, right? So as a manufacturing engineering graduate, as a management consultant, you kind of go, that can be better and I'd like it to be better, right?
Right.
But I then applied to the Idea Space Accelerator program and got in, and then everything just kind of logically progressed. But it's not like I had a burning passion. You mentioned I listened to the JDL episodes just the last couple of days, right? And you mentioned Mel Nava from One Export, right? Like she just had this. She worked in that import export customs space for so long and was just beside herself with frustration how difficult already. It's part of who she is, right? 100% it's part of who she is, right? And I could name 5 other, 10 other, 20 other founders, right? They're just obsessed with the problem. They're obsessed with the customer and they are on a mission to fix this thing, right? So for those 2 reasons, I was like, you know what, it's time to wrap this up. And that kind of starts the journey into what I am passionate about, right? So that's the transition. So Diane Eustachio actually called it before me, right? Just in a way that only she can, right? She's like, look, Ben, traction is struggling here. You've been working on this for a while. Whilst you're, figuring this out and resolving this, what she kind of really meant was, do you need to take this dog around the back of the shed? Yeah. Put it out of its misery, but she said it, diplomatically and lovingly, as only she can. She said, look, we need a financial modeling mentor for the Idea Space Accelerator program. We need someone that can help the founders with financial projections, with budget management, with fundraising.
That's easy peasy for you.
Semi-successful with, as much as the traction afforded me at ABSA, we've been able to raise some funds to fund the 2 years. So she said, would you come on board as that? You can start part-time and then, we see where it goes, right? And then again, another long story short, over the course of like a year, I just sort of transitioned from being the financial modeling and fundraising mentor into the management team at Idea Space, decided they wanted to be more. So as you said, right, all of the investment at Idea Space, the first few years, it started off as equity investment and then they turned it to a grant. And then they wanted to start making equity investments outside of the accelerator program. So not just the accelerator program, but as an early stage kind of first check VC to use some of that money that they had available. And Diane said, we need someone to basically set this up, right? So what's our thesis? What's our investment thesis? What's our due diligence criteria and protocol? What's our process? What investment contracts should we use, et cetera, et cetera. So I was very lucky. I got, lucky in one way. So I took that job on the 6th of January, 2020.
Oh my God, right before the pandemic. Woo! Yeah. Okay.
So I had about 2.5, 3 months before we started entering into the lockdowns. I took most of that time and a little bit longer, when we were all working remote on calls and things. I spoke to the VCs. This is kind of like Kaya and Foxconn especially just starting to get up to speed, but I was not so sort of aware of them, but I spoke to a lot of angels and a lot of institutional finance people about how I should structure this and basically design the structure for Idea Space Ventures. And kicked that off in the beginning of 2020 and kicked off the best part of 5 years of venture capital investing with Idea Space. So, going back, it was all, it was, as you said earlier, right? It was founder and then failed founder, transitioned into mentor and then transitioned into VC investor, all with the support of the Idea Space family, to whom I will remain forever grateful.
No, amazing. But before we take our last break real quick, I want to understand, coming from a founder and literally going through that whole gamut, right? And now going back to your ethos, which is, really understanding the numbers behind it, solving problems. But now, instead of just doing that for yourself, you do it for other founders, you help through it. And that's the lens you look at now. But what did that founder journey equip you with, considering now that you are now entering into that VC lens, and obviously putting that whole experience of fundraising before and really doing management consulting? What did that equip you, and what did that teach you now as a guy that now, coming from a founder, you now help founders and see if you're going to be eligible for an investment from a VC, or even also you had that you wrote your own checks as an angel.
Yeah. So I think the big difference, right, when you talk about coming from the consulting background, from the corporate background,
right?
The thing you have in those two situations is time and resources. Okay, so you may not feel like you have time. You have a project deadline for consulting, or the CEO wants to get some corporate initiative by whenever, right? But you'll spec this program out. There'll be an opportunity to do it properly, to do it thoroughly, and people would prefer it done right.
Yeah.
So and resources, obviously, if you're in a big corporate scenario, you've got access to all sorts of resources. What I realized as being a founder is that so much, especially in early stage, right?
Yeah. So
much of success is about execution.
Yes.
It's about prioritizing. You've got so many hours in a day multiplied by however many team members you have in your small, lean team. So what are you going to spend that time doing? And focusing on, and I won't go through the framework in detail, right? But in the early stage, you have to know that the problem that you're thinking to solve is genuinely a problem, right? You need to understand your customers. You need to spend time with them. Then you build whatever that prototype is. Then you move out of that into customer acquisition, try to cement traction. You can't do everything. At each of those stages, there are some things that are more important than other things.
Yeah.
And things like printing your business cards and your embroidered team shirts and going to every conference under the sun are almost never important, right? And that's, again, something in the corporate world that you find yourself doing quite a lot of.
Yep.
So I think that's the big difference, right? And that's what that journey taught me. And look, whether I'm trying to help founders today or whether I'm looking at investing, obviously the problem solution, that's table stakes, right? It's got to be there. It's got to make sense. It's got to resonate with me. I need to understand, that has to be something I think, there's a business idea in here, right? That's a concept. But by far is looking at the founders and saying, these guys clocking off at 5, to head home for badminton practice or the latest episode of X on Netflix, or, are they there like just trying to figure this out? And I don't, I want to be really clear, right? I don't promote hustle culture, right? I do promote hustle culture. I don't promote burnout culture, right? No. I'm not saying that, you've got to be working 18-hour days, 7 days a week, no breaks, 100%. You got to have a little bit of an outlet, and you got to be able to, stay healthy.
Yeah.
But you have to be obsessed with the problem, and you have to be obsessed with the customer, and you have to prioritize the most important activities at the right stage of your growth journey. And, a large part of being an angel investor or being a startup support consultant is spotting founders that are good at that and have that ability, and helping founders to maintain that focus, right? Like all the years I've spent working with the Cubo guys and the Idea Space guys on the accelerator program, alongside the investing activity, not a single founding team, did we do like our kickoff diagnostic session and say, you're doing all the right things, just keep on going like that, right? Mm-hmm. They're always doing some things which aren't important right now. And they may seem like they may make sense. They may not be like totally ridiculous, like stupid things to be doing. But you just have to connect the logic and ask, but why are you doing that now? What's the objective? What's the KPI you're pushing at this stage for you? Is that right? And oftentimes we get, and they're like, oh yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. But I'm going to put that to one side. I'm just going to focus on what's important for our startup at this stage.
Correct.
So that execution, I think I can't speak for all of the guys, all of the investors in the ecosystem that haven't been founders, but you definitely have a very direct line of sight to what that actually means in reality when you've been through the journey yourself.
Mm. I love it. Now, all right, let's take our last break, and when we come back, we will now talk about investor Ben and angel Ben. How did that come along? And again, give you feedback and insight on how VCs actually operate. Because what I love about Ben's point of view is that, again, he came as a management consultant, founder, and now he went to VC and angel. And again, there's so much more to learn from this episode. But let's talk about that more after the break.
Hey, hustlers, before we resume the episode, let me tell you a very quick secret. Do you guys ever wonder how we're able to consistently release episode after episode here in Hustleshare without missing a date over the past 3 years? Well, it's not just pure hustle, because I'm also running my podcast along with me running my startup full time. Now, for some of you who have listened to this podcast, you guys very well know that I created a startup that is designed to help the best podcasters in Southeast Asia to realize their full potential, which is called Podcast Network Asia. And over the past couple of years, we've achieved quite a lot in P&A, helping hundreds of podcasters create world-class episodes consistently. However, what we realize is that we are not really solving the real problem of all podcasters in the world if we're not going to productize the thing that we're very good at, which is helping podcasters solve the two main pain points of a podcaster, which is number one, nobody really likes to edit their own show. Especially if you're listening to your own voice. Just like me, I cringe a lot. Having to listen to my voice for 3 to 4 hours just to release a 1-hour episode. It's no fun. And then the other thing is that most podcasters, just like me, are absolutely clueless on how to properly grow their show, which is something that we have perfected in Podcast Network Asia. So we've decided to put this all in one product that helps any podcaster in the world create world-class shows that people will love and will continuously grow. And that's why we created Pod Machine. Pod Machine is the most affordable podcast subscription service that helps you with your podcasting needs. We've got everything from audio production, crafting designs, and marketing and growth support. So as a podcaster, you can now just focus on the thing that matters the most, creating great content for your listeners. So if you are an existing podcaster or someone that actually wants to create their podcast now, no need to worry. You got a founder's discount by listening here on Hustleshare. So sign up now at podmachine.com. And aside from the free trial that you're going to get as a new user, I'm throwing in another one free edit as soon as you sign up for just as low as $49.99 USD a month to start creating a consistent and world-class podcast. Again, that's podmachine.com and use the code Hustleshare to get your founder discount. So if you have friends that are podcasters and if you want to have a podcast just like this, y'all know what to do. So just go and talk to you guys in Pod Machine.
And we're back from the break. We are still with Ben Alderson and told us the amazing journey and again, the transition to being a VC. So obviously, after that, you're now a VC during the pandemic. And that's where I really spent a lot of time with you, not just as a VC, but also as an angel. And again, that meticulous background coming from becoming a consultant and also becoming a founder just resonates through, right? But now, it's a different side, right? You're coming from a point of view of you pitching and now you're being the one pitched to, right? And walk us through again. I want to understand what that process is and let me know, because again, this is typically what happens, right? So when Ben was still part of Idea Space as head of investments, right? What happens is that as a founder, you pitch, right, to either an associate or to Ben himself, right? That pitch, he's not the main decision maker. He's part of the investment committee. And back then, that investment committee technically are the ones in charge, or the committee that says who invests, who gets invested on, whatever the check size is, and why. And they usually have a thesis and a method they like. So it's not just Ben making that thing. So Ben, with whatever you pitch him, will then take it to the investment committee and they will decide. that investment committee, again, most of them are no longer there. It's a different investment committee now, but they used to be Ben himself, Kat Chan, when she was still there, and also Butch, right?
That's right.
And
MVP? No, he no, that would have been amazing. But
right.
he was frying bigger fish at the time.
Okay.
But no, we had Tessa, who's our chief financial officer. So whoever was the head of, it started off as Miss V, way back, actually before me. But then, whoever was the head of finance for Ideaspace, right? And so they were black hatting the number side. So Cat, Bird, were kind of more on the concept, on the business model, on market, on founder teams. And Tefka would really sort of deep dive on the numbers, just see like these guys have any debt hanging around their necks, like take a look at the audited financial statements, see if there are any red flags there.
Yeah.
So,
okay, so this IC. So the reason why I do this is because a lot of founders are very naive on what happens after they pitch. They think that, oh my God is now up to Ben to fucking do this. No, it's not. Ben or whoever you pitched, their job is to dissect whatever the hell you just did in that 1 hour long pitch and to make it a 5-minute pitch with an investment memo. Or is it even worth bringing up to IC? Because the thing about Ideaspace and Kubo, and they come at a very unique thing. That's why Kubo and Ideaspace needs to make it. They're the most accessible VC and most inclusive entity in the Philippines in terms of startups. Yes, there's TBIs, but they come from a different lens. Yes, there's the ICT, right? There's DOST. That's a different lens. But in terms of pure startup bias and startup centric approach, that nobody else does that from a inclusive standpoint than the DOST, Kubo and Ideaspace. So the reason why I want to talk about this, Ben, is I want founders to understand what happens after they pitch you before as a founder and what the IC typically discusses. And this is how you will be judged per se. We're not going to teach you the tricks and the trade of what should get you investment, but this is the conversation that happens after. And that IC, and IC stands for Investment Committee, technically is the one. So in ICs, walk me and please let me know if I'm wrong. There's different types of ICs. There's a sole IC where there's one person and whatever he says goes, but that's rare. There's investment committees out there that say majority wins, meaning, so for example, there's 3. If 2 out of the 3 say yes, then most likely that startup is going to get an investment. And there's also a unanimous IC, meaning you have to get everybody to say yes in that investment committee in order for you to say no. So for example, there's 4 in the investment committee at Ideaspace during Ben's time. If 3 say yes, but 1 say no, it's still a no, right?
That's right.
Walk me through that typical process, because my God, the amount of people, I can just imagine the amount of startups that have pitched you per se, and how many actually make it to IC, and in IC, how many even get a check. Walk me through that process.
Sure. So you're absolutely right? In terms of the breakdown, you just mentioned the different ways in which some ICs work. I guess let me start at the beginning. So I think there's an extent to which I actually am responsible for whether or not the startup gets invested in. So that doesn't mean the IC doesn't have final approval, but the way that we worked at Ideaspace was, let's not waste time on things, right? So
got it.
We would do an initial triage, right? So whether it was when I was working with Christine Chong a little while back, and then Mateo more recently, Mateo Gonzalez,
and now it's Migu.
And now it's Migu, absolutely. But the first triage is basically just to make sure these fundamentals are in place, right? So when that this isn't some joker with an idea, but there's no traction, there's no bones, there's no nothing, right? So, or it's not somebody who's got a conventional business idea. It's not actually a scalable startup opportunity,
right?
So there's a first triage, and we do like what we call like a pre-DD paper, which is basically a 1-pager. And we just sort of make sure all the tick boxes are there, right? That this sort of
Imagine
checks
your
out.
pitch became a one pager. Just imagine that, guys. So if your
Literally.
fundamental is fucked up, it will all
If we
end up
don't-
in a one pager, guys. That's it.
100%. If we don't understand it, and we don't know what's going on here. If it's a slow week, right, then right, maybe you get a second chance, right? Maybe you're like, I got time for a call. I got time to figure out what these guys are talking about. But if there's a lot going on, if there's plenty of text coming through, deal flow, then we move on, right? So then, if the one page checks out and it seems like there's opportunity here, but you're taking most of the founders, the claims and the information for face value at that point, right? So that's just it checks out triage. You go to the next stage. That's when you go into the real due diligence research, right? So that's when we try to get underneath the fancy slides and really understand, does this work, right? So whether you're doing research on the team members, to see whether they've got the skills and experience that they claim that they have, whether you're looking, you're validating the size of the market that they say exists. You're doing your own tam-tam sort of math on that just to see if that is true, etc. So that's the second part, and that's when we write the IC memo. That's when the longer memo comes out, basically critiques and challenges the claims in the pitch deck, and that's what we then present to the investment committee, or we send as a pre-read to the investment committee ahead of a discussion about that.
Got it.
But the whole point of that process is, I say not the whole point, but an important element of that process is that I don't want to take things. It was never my job as head of investments at Ideaspace to take things to the IC that I'm not sure about for them to make a decision on because I don't know.
Correct.
Right. My role as head of investments is I think we should invest in this startup because here's the case. Here's the opportunity that sits ahead of them.
Makes
and
sense.
I am bringing it to the IC. And that's a combination of myself and the analysts and the associates, right? Like doing the research, compiling the paper. So we'll do all the work there. If we believe in this, then we put it forward. And we were always very lucky at Ideaspace to have a very supportive IC. So their role was really to say, look, to spot the red flags that we might have missed, to black hat and to really stress test some of the calculations or the assumptions that we've made, and to just make sure, that if Ben says this is for investment, then we should, let's just stress test and make sure that we should go ahead and commit to this, right? So we didn't have a unanimous VC, but I don't think we ever found that there were situations. I can't remember a specific situation where someone was like, "Yeah, let's do this. It's absolutely brilliant," and someone else was, "You guys are crazy. This isn't. There's no market here." Like,
there you go.
No, and I think it's at the end of the day, if you have a structure, if everyone buys into a structure for what we as an investments team would spend time on writing the paper, researching, doing the due diligence, writing the paper, and presenting to the IC, if we're all agreed these are the important things, then you have to miss something fairly fundamental for then someone to say, okay, well, I don't get it, right? So it's really the IC was making sure you had enough different perspectives around the table to be able to stress their things from different angles and make sure that everybody was happy with the decision before we made it. But I'd also say, this is a great thing about a relatively small and, close team, right? Is that I obviously wouldn't just, it's very rare. Sometimes during the pandemic, when you're working remote, it's very rare that something gets to IC and Kat Chan has no idea that we've been working on this and she's seeing it for the first time.
She knows everybody.
She's
the oracle.
She's seen them come into pitch. She's asking me along the way.
Yeah.
How do these guys do? Does that check out? I'm not sure about the market. What do you say? How's that working out? So. None of this it's all a transition. It's all a build towards the final IC conversation, the final yes/no decision. And I think we pitched it pretty right. We got the balance pretty right over that time. There was nothing that we spent hours and hours working on that we took to IC and said, we're proposing an XK investment into this startup at a valuation of Y. And then they just kicked it back and said, no, we're not interested. You find ways to filter stuff out earlier on in the process and just to save time from working too long on any one startup.
Okay, I love it. Now, I want to understand first, just give the founders that are listening here a better perspective. So you've seen it all, right? Startups that are ready, startups that are not ready, startups that are probably on the way. But what makes a startup investment ready? especially now. This is going to be coming. This is now the lens that you're going to be with for the rest of a lot of your career. But especially in the Philippines, I want to do a Philippine-centric POV here, right? What are the things that startups need to work on for them to be investment ready? Because a lot of it gets skewed over. Like, for example, I remember the last, say, quarter from Philippine Startup Week till probably GoAb and then some. There's a lot of startups that pitch there, and I look at them and like, some of these guys are ready, but some of these guys still need work. I'm not going to mention who, and I think I've given feedback there, and it doesn't mean that you've won a competition that you're ready for investment. That's a totally different discussion. A startup pitching competition's POV is not an IC POV, right? What would be those fundamentals, Ben, that you think that are, hey, you're ready for investment, and what makes a startup not yet ready, and what's the typical stuff that they need to work on in order for them to be ready for an investment?
Sure. I just want to talk to your point about startup pitch competitions as well for a minute. So I have a potentially unpopular opinion, but I generally don't like startup pitch competitions.
It's a lot of time too. My God. Okay.
Not a fan. Like, at the end of the day, right, the objective of a startup is to be a successful business, right? It's the main one. Startups are different from conventional businesses in the growth profile, right? It is accepted and expected that you will be loss-making for a period of time because of the nature of unit economics,
correct,
scaling, and so on and so forth, right? But they're still fundamentally a business, and your objective is to get customers and earn revenues and grow to be profitable. And pitch competitions is winning a pitch competition. So just a little bit of advice, for founders from my perspective. Pitch competitions can be strategically beneficial, depending on the right
timing. Also,
100%, right? So the first opportunity is exposure. If it's a high-profile event, if there's going to be a lot of people there, right? Then okay, get in front of those people. And the secondly is if the prize is strategic. So if it involves mentorship, if it involves support, maybe a collaboration.
Heck, if there's cash, go get it.
So there's opportunity there, right? But don't spend your life preparing for pitch competitions, and don't we won this pitch competition in your pitch deck. It doesn't matter.
Nope.
It doesn't matter, right? So anyway, that's pitch competitions. Just my quick take on those. Like, if there's a specific reason, go for it, get it done, move on, but never take your eye off the main prize, which is customers and revenue and traction.
Right.
And I think that segues me nicely into the next point, I guess, right? So I think there are 4 things that I instinctively gravitate towards in any pitch deck or investment memo or any kind of materials that a founder has sent, right? And so the first one is problem solution fit. It's table stakes, right? Like, at the end of the day, if I don't understand what the business is trying to do, then what's the problem and what's the solution that you're going to sell and monetize, then I'm confused. I don't get it, right? So I stop reading from that point.
Start thinking about lunch. There you go.
Next deck. And also, by the way, like, it's not just, sometimes a problem and a solution on consecutive slides can both sort of make sense, but they don't make sense together, right? So sometimes there's no continuity between the two. So that's a super, and founders are terrible at this because they have been working on their business for so long. They're in the weeds and they forget to take to sort of unlearn it and look at it and sometimes that's impossible, right? So another little tip, right? Get someone else to read your deck that ideally knows nothing about your business before you send it to anyone, because they will see the silly things that you miss. Anyway, going back to the question. So the first thing is problem solution fit. I want that to be strong. I want there to be some genius and, this is a great solution. This is innovative. This is effective. I can see how it's going to work. And then the following 3 things, something that I don't know if I heard this first from you, but I remember hearing it first from you. When I was a founder and I heard you talk at an event on a panel somewhere, it's the 3 T's buzzword bingo. It's team time traction, right? Like, it's, you can't get past it. At the end of the day, these are the fundamentals, and a lot has changed about the startup world, but for early stage startups, you can't get past it. So TAM, is the market big enough? Like, at the end of the day, how quickly are you going to saturate the available market? Are you going to run out of new customers? It's it's pure logic.
Mm-hmm.
Traction. Let me come back to traction in a minute, because that's the one I tend to scrutinize a little bit more. Team, I want to know two things. I want to know that the founders have the skills and experience, right? That they understand the domain, the industry they're playing in, that they get these customers, right? If I was assessing myself from my app sale days, if I was receiving my own pitch, I'd have written me off very early, because I knew nothing about cosmetics. I knew nothing about cosmetics resellers. I knew nothing about that space. I don't even really have like a background in logistics and supply chain, right? So what was I going to do anyway? So skills and experience. But a little bit later, I'll ask founders, like, why should I invest in you? And I don't mean the startup. I don't mean the concept. I don't mean, the business. I mean you as a person, you as a founder, you as a dedicated person that wants to solve this problem.
Yeah.
So let me go back to traction. I literally have 3 or 4 messages in my LinkedIn inbox, saying, "Hey, I'm working on this. Here's my slide deck. What do you think?" Right? And there's still a pitch. There's still a validation stage. So they either haven't actually got an MVP out, or they're just trying to get it out there amongst their target customer market.
Yeah.
And it's just hard. I almost feel like there's no point in me reading the rest of the deck, right? Because, like, frankly, in some ways, it doesn't even matter what I think until you've got a customer to pay for it, right?
Yes.
Like, especially if I'm not your target. If I'm your target customer, okay, maybe I can say, all right, would I buy this? Do I, is this solving a problem that I have? Is it solving it well? Do I want to try this out? That gives me a little bit of insight. But at the end of the day, it's just a nice deck. It's just a thesis, right? If you haven't actually got customers paying for it. And so, and if you want to look even more investment ready, you want month-on-month growth, right? You don't just want to be selling to the same 10 people that you found 3 months ago that are renewing their annual subscription, et cetera, right? That's all good, but do you have the ability to find more and more people that are willing to pay for your products or service, right? And the reason why those 3 T's are, remain the kind of stalwarts and the kind of, underlining principles of whether or not you're investable is because they're the ones that are hard to change, right? So if I look at your business model slide and I see that you're pricing your products or service in a certain way and I don't like it, but I know that we can have a conversation about that, right? Like if you thought about charging commission instead of a subscription, and you can change it overnight, right?
Right.
If your go-to-market strategy, right? Like if I go, like you're too sales heavy, you're not a B2B, you're B2C, you need to get all over social media, you need to get out to some conferences and events, whatever, go to some universities and hand out flyers. Like, we can change that, right? So if I don't like that slide, that approach you're taking, then it raises the question if you know what you're doing, but I know that we can change it. So I'm still engaged. If you cannot grow customers in a greenhouse or a science lab, right? They're out there or they're not. The size of the market, all right, there's some CAGR, maybe there's some growth, but fundamentally, the market's big enough or it's not. The team, you might have a gap in the team that you can hire for, but fundamentally, the core team's got to be present, right? I'm not PE, I'm not private equity. I'm not going to invest, fire the team, bring in a new management team and start again, right? I'm investing in you guys. And traction, it can get better, week by week, month by month. But I'm looking at the deck right now and I want to see how you guys are doing right now and whether I'm going to pull the trigger right now.
Correct.
So, you can't create sales that you haven't already actually sold. And so those are the 3 things that, if you look at all the other slides in the deck, you can be safe in the knowledge. You can sit down and have a discussion with the founders and we can talk about whether or not this is the right way to do this or whether we should change the approach. But for team, TAM and traction, it's there or it's not. It's black and white. And so that's why we gravitated on those things. And so as a founder, if you want to think about investor readiness or investability, those are the 3 things or plus problem solution fit. So those 4 things, they've got to be absolutely solid. Otherwise, everyone's just sort of writing you off as an interesting presentation, but I don't buy it. It's a scalable startup opportunity.
Totally agree. And again, you mentioned about those fundamentals. It cannot be mid. It has to almost be a holy shit. And the way you say a holy shit is that, team, solid team. I actually have I'll digress this a little bit. I see this a lot in startups, in the team traction, right? Team slide, not team traction, team slide, right?
Yeah.
If if you want to give yourself a chance of a holy shit on the team slide, you need to have experience over the founder, this problem you're trying to solve. Ben said it well. Like, for example, Mel Nava. She's been in exporting before she did it. So that's why she's doing really, really well, right? Nel Ligo, right? This guy has been in F&B, FMCG for the longest time, so he understands supply chain, right? ER Rolian, FMCG, supply chain, PNG type of guy, right? You need to have expertise or domain expertise over the problem that you're trying to solve. And second thing, I see this a lot. Fractional founders. And if the same fractional founder is in everybody's deck, you need to be able to find someone that can actually help you build product. And it's like, ideally, he's all in. Because if the same fractional founder is in everybody's fractional founder slide, how the hell are you building product? What's your take on the fractional founder piece there all the time?
Yeah, like I think the only space it has potential is in finance and legal. Not in product, not in growth. You can have some creative strategic partnerships, like if you can't afford to pay people up front for like third party services for sales and marketing, then you could do a commission deal or, like a small portion of revenue or something like that, right? So kind of pay for performance, right? Correct. So that's okay. But equity, no, it doesn't make any sense.
No.
And be careful who, the other thing is like, even let's say it's not equity, right? But you're saying, we're working with this sales and marketing agency, they are our fractional CMO.
Nah.
Right. Even if it's not equity, right? It still doesn't work because, and this goes back to a similar argument about whether or not you should actually build your products, right? Or whether you should speak. So when I was founding Upsell, so I learned this. So I can tell everybody listening to this podcast, right? This is a mistake I made. I learned the hard way, so I know what I'm talking about. We built the first version of Upsell using a third-party development agency.
Yikes.
And we did that because I didn't have a tech co-founder. I looked, I tried to find one. I did have one eventually, by the way, but for the first version, wanted to get started. We had this money from Idea Space, this grant, we wanted to use it, wanted to get started, right?
Yeah.
So, and this is nothing against that agency, right? Great guys, did really great work. But there are some fundamentals, and this stays true for any kind of third party support, right? The first one is there's always a bigger check for them at some point. So whatever kind of prioritization or support you're getting today, right? And
you're just a client.
And they've got their own business. So they have to make responsible decisions for that business. And the right decision for them may be, these guys want to pay us 10 times more and they're demanding dedication and response times. So suddenly you become the smaller fish. You are a much lower priority than you were when you had that lovely conversation about how they were going to be there to support you. And the second thing is handover and transition. So especially with tech, but to an extent, I think the same with marketing and any other area. Let's just say it's tech. You at some point you do find a CTO. You find a CTO, good skills, good experience, great fit with the team, etc. I guarantee that the dev agency will hand over the code and they will say, we need to rewrite this.
Yep.
Right. And it might not be because it's bad or wrong or anything, right? It's just everyone's different, right? Your new CTO, whoever they are, will bring their own thoughts around architecture, around framework, around tech stack, etc. And they'll say, if I'm going to continue to build this product going forward to scale, then I'm going to have to basically, sort of start from scratch and transition this over to an alternative setup, right? And I've never heard that not happen. You would have thought, like, even a broke clock is right twice a day, right? You just technically sometimes the CTO will say, that's how I'd have built it. Perfect. Let's continue. It never happens. I don't know why it never happens. So I think have a fractional CFO, because at the end of the day, early stage startups, especially, the basic finance you should be able to handle as a management team. So you just need that, that on point technical accounting support.
Correct.
Same with legal as well. When you need a lawyer, obviously you need someone who can actually review the contracts. You can actually bring that technical insight, but you don't need that every day, right?
Nope.
But don't put them on the pitch deck if they're not part of the founding team.
Correct.
Don't put them on the pitch deck, right? Because they're not responsible for decisions. They're not responsible for growth, for direction, for the important decisions, right? So don't put them on the deck. And the same with advisory, right? Like advisors, if they're spending time with you week in, week out, and they've shown you they're invested. They have literally invested cash, then fine. But if you're calling them up once a month and having a coffee and they're giving you some sort of useful insight, unless they're Mark Zuckerberg, right? Like if it's like a mind-blowing name from the startup scene, and you're having a coffee with them once a month, and an investor is going to phone them up and say, "Hey, what do you think about these guys?" And they're going to go, "Yeah, they're great. You should take a close look at them," right? But if it's someone that no one's ever heard of, even if they are highly reputable in their industry, don't put them on the deck. Just talk about them on the side.
No, totally agree. And this is a litmus test as a founder, right? If number one, don't go in as a solo founder. As a former solo founder myself, you're as good as dead. It's super duper hard. It doesn't set the right tone. And second, as a founder or the main guy, it says a lot about you if you can convince other people to actually join you who are actually equipped to go this and go all in with you. Or let's just say part-time, but still he's the guy building that for you as a founder, not a dev shop, not whatever. He's in. Like he's actually spending in, day out, hours and hours to help you solve this problem, right? Because if you're Batman, or let's just say you are Nick Fury, and you said you had the Avengers, but there's no other Avenger than you, then what the hell are we investing on? People invest in teams. They don't invest in just a superhero.
So there's two other reasons. Well, I think being a solo founder is hard, right? And it's not impossible. Just for any solo founders out there, right? It's not impossible, but
it's super duper hard.
It's hard, 100%, right? And so the two things I would add to that are, one is accountability, right? So you know, if you're, I don't care who you are, you'd have to be the most disciplined, ethical, moral person in the world, right? You're going to have some terrible weeks. And you're just going to need to clock off early and go home and hit the bar, right? And you're not going to get that deadline. You're not going to get that thing handed in. You're not going to do the extra mile research on whatever, right? But when you've got another founder in the room and you know that you're accountable to them, they're accountable to you, then you're going to do things as right, as thoroughly, as full on, as professionally as you can. And the second is just perspective, right? Like we're all individuals and we have a set of life experiences and a set of understandings and expertise, but we can only come from any to any decision from the direction that we come from it, right? If you've got 2 or 3 other people in your team that can come from a slightly different perspective, they can spot the red flag, they can spot the gaps, they can challenge, and you can all, as long as you have a psychologically safe environment where everyone's opinion is welcomed and heard, then you can hash that out and then you figure out the right way to go from that. But as a solo founder, you can have one perspective, and that can often be a little blinkered, right? And there's only ever one path you're going to go down, and that can be dangerous, and it can take longer to get to success if you're going that way. So as an investor, I always like to say that I look at solo founders as the same opportunity, but it's an absolutely unavoidable bias. I immediately think this is going to be tougher for you than it is for the guys that come in with 2-3 people in the team. It's inevitable. It's tough.
And startups is a team sport. It doesn't matter how good you are, even if you're a super duper hero that you're the best, again, like the most talented person in the world. At one point of your startup journey, especially very early on, you're going to need help. And the only people who are supposed to be unconditional in that world are your co-founders, because they're all in. And that shows a lot of sacrifice. You've known this, Ben. Like we've in P&A, we've pretty much gotten one of the worst cards ever that you can get. And the only way I was able to get that out is because I had great co-founders left.
Yeah.
Whether they're investors, co-founders, and whatnot, that's what it is. Now, unfortunately, we're running out of time. I have a couple more last questions here, right? You're also an angel investor.
I am.
Right? What's the difference in terms of your perspective when you analyze a startup as a VC and as an angel? Is there a differentiator? What do you typically like to look at, and what are the differences if there are?
I think I have to. Okay, so I know I got to be quick, but I think I kind of have to answer that question with few answers, right? So
absolutely, go ahead.
Because I've been in VC, it's not like I say, all right, I'll put my angel hat on and I'll cut these guys some slack because they're earlier or whatever, right? Like I think so in terms of like what has to be there, right? I'm looking for the same table stakes, the same minimum criteria, the same core fundamentals, right? But I think if you're looking outside of me specifically, if you're looking at people pitching to angel investors that haven't been in VCs or aren't in VCs, it's actually still the same. It's just that it's specific to the person. So angels will probably be thinking, can I help? Right? So VCs have a fairly decent network, the ability to introduce. They tend to be more stage and industry specific around. We know founders that have been in this situation before. We can help you, progress through these stages of growth and the kind of challenges and banana skins that are going to come up. Right. I think for angels, like it's a little bit of an easy example, but like if you've got a health tech product, go pitch to doctors and nurses, right? Go pitch to angel investors that can really relate to the problem and really want it to be solved, and can give you additional insight about why it may or it may not be effective. I think that's the key thing, because angels, unless you're talking about the super billionaires, then there's a limit to the amount of 5K, 10K, 20K checks that they can write. And so they're going to want to spend their time with people solving problems that are a little bit more personal to them, that they're a little bit more passionate about, and they feel they've got the ability to contribute value. So someone might come along with an unrelated startup to them and they're like, I think it's a great idea and you guys are a great team and I wish you all the best, but I can't really add value here. So I'll pass. So I think that's the difference, the key difference between the two.
That's amazing. Now, all right. At this point of your career, since you've left Idea Space, you've now been mentoring. And I want to understand. So obviously, there's what Ben has been busy with is bamentor.online, which we'll talk about that later. But since you've run the whole gamut, that whole thing, what advice would you generally give the typical Filipino startup right now? Because again, I don't know if you saw, but the startup ranking of Manila somewhere is decelerating. That says a lot, right? So what would be your advice? Because at the end of the day, the whole ecosystem hinges on the performance of its startups. Yes, there's so much we can do as community people, as VCs and whatnot, but the whole wave, if there is a wave, or is this a trough, or it's an ebbs and flows, is all operating or hinging on startup performance.
Okay.
In this climate, what would be your general advice now for startups, for them to be able to navigate? Because especially in a market like this where tariffs are all over and people are uncertain, it's hard to navigate it because it's not 2020, 2021 again. I don't know when that will happen again. What will be your advice?
Okay, so I put it in two parts, right? So the first thing we talked about it already, right? It's just about execution. So you have to prioritize the right task for you at the stage you're at. And if you're if you can figure that out, great. There's a ton of advice online, but if you can't, get yourself in an accelerator or get yourself a mentor that can take a subjective look, an unbiased, neutral look at where you are at and what is important to prioritize at this time. What are the metrics that you should be driving, and what are your areas of focus for you right now? Yeah. Because the most important thing is pace and momentum, right? Like it's, you identify the problem, you come up with the solution, you've got to go out there and get customers. Now you've got to start building a team, right? You can't afford to take too long in any one of these periods of transition, right? Yeah. Otherwise you get bogged down and it starts to weigh on you, and investors see that and clients see that, and it creates this kind of, it's like applies the brakes. It makes everything harder. So that's the first thing, is just be super clear what every day looks like for you, what every week looks like for you, what every month looks like for you in terms of what we got to get done right now. And that will keep you moving along more quickly, right? And the second part of the answer, and it's going to, people are going to sigh and facepalm, but it's AI, right? And I don't just mean, is your product AI? I don't, has it got the buzzwords? Have you got AI somewhere in your pitch? Right? I don't mean that. I mean, as a complement to what I just said a moment ago, there are so many things that will help you move faster, right? Yeah. Like whether it's drafting materials, collaterals, whether it's research, whatever it might be, right? You have to embrace You talk a lot, Ron, when you get the opportunity to about, the differences in the availability of capital right now, since the glory days, you have to do more with less, right? You've got to make runway last longer. And AI applications, whether it's outbound marketing and customer acquisition and all the things I said before, right? They're just going to help you to move more quickly, which just really just amplifies my prior point, right? If you've been raising for a year and you're still doing the rounds and talking to investors and angels, right? They'll say that they'll open you there. You say, "Oh, we're different now, but we've done this different, we've pivoted, whatever," right? And they'll go, "Okay, great, yeah, send it over." But they cannot be that they absolutely will be influenced to an extent by the fact, yeah, these guys have been around for a while, they're not really moving forward, they're not, there is a sort of a staleness that comes with not moving forward, and I think that's the important thing.
That is amazing. Thank you so much, Ben, for such an amazing episode. I wish we had more time, but unfortunately we gotta go. But again, you are a mentor, and people are actually needing the mentorship that a Ben Alderson does. Again, what if they want to work with you? Where do they go, and where did they? Wait, sorry, cut. 3, 2, 1, and go. And if people want to work with you, where do they go, and how do they do that?
Sure thing. So, find me on LinkedIn. I don't think there are more Ben Aldersons in the Philippines. So you should, a simple search, you get to me pretty quick. I also respond on Facebook, on Messenger as well, so you can find me there, or bamentor.online. And there are options to book stuff there as well. And I just want to say super quick, Ron, as well, just a couple of days ago, we launched, my wife, Maria Katrina Manalo, and my co-founders, Albert Laura and China Lau, launched pitchly.online. So www.pitchly.online. It's super early pitch deck builder tool, enabling founders to build those first important investment collaterals. And it's kind of part of the service that we offer, right? So please do check out pitchly.online. And it's first run, right? So we want the feedback. We want your criticisms, this sucks, this could be better. Why doesn't it have this? We want everything. So please do check that out as well. But I think, for early founders, especially people building their first deck, it's really useful information to cut out a load of the flaws and mistakes that we see a lot of people making. So go check that out as well.
Thank you so much, Ben. But before I let you go, follow us whatever podcast app you're listening to, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or whatever podcast app you're listening to. Just, again, if you see a star there, give us a 5-star, give us feedback so we can improve our content. And if we did see some jargon, it's going to be the show notes on hustleshare.com. And also, if you want to support Hustleshare and be one of our premium supporters, just go to premium.hustleshare.com. Again, Ben, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. Great pleasure to be here.
All right, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.